Hi there, and welcome to I'll Knit If I Want To. I'm Andrea Maury of DRK Everyday Knits, starting off strong. And this is a little weekly podcast where I do my best to answer some of your questions, mostly about knitting, but we sometimes dabble into other making topics. And today I am wearing my other weekender crew. So I wore my hand spun version last week. And this week I am wearing my version made out of Brooklyn Tweed's Dapple yarn, which is a cotton wool blend, which I love because 100% cotton and linen yarns tend to be kind of hard on my hands. They don't have a lot of elasticity. And so I just find my hands can get sore while I'm knitting with them. So I love a blend that offers the lightness of a fiber such as cotton or linen, but it gives a little more bounce and elasticity like wool, because there is wool in it. So anyways, I'm actually going to talk a little bit more about this sweater and how it fits, because we've got a question that will relate to it later on in the show. So we'll talk about it more in a few minutes, but thank you for tuning in today. Let's jump into some questions. So the first question is about self-striping yarn and ribbing. And I apologize for my husky voice. I actually was treated to a massage this past week, and it was my first time getting this type of massage, and I don't know what happened, but ever since then I have this like husky, sultry voice happening. But as long as you can hear me, that's all that matters. So self-striping yarn and ribbing. I am making the DRK Everyday Socks in a self-striping yarn. Whenever the yarn changes color, the purl stitches have a glitch, for lack of a better word, where both colors show on the purl stitches. When the socks contract, in other words, when they're not stretched out, when they're just like this instead of whoop, like this, that little glitch is not visible. Is there any way to avoid this? Or is this correctable? Does this always happen? Yes, it does. So in purling, or whenever we have a purl stitch on a row where we're changing colors, it is the head of the stitch is pulled to the front instead of being tucked into the back like it would be on a knit stitch. So that's what a purl stitch is. It's the little head of the V of the knit stitch is kind of how I think about it. So when we change colors, that is going to happen. I brought an example. I happen to have these up here in my studio. These are a pair of striped DRK Everyday Socks. And if you look, even when they're pulled out, especially if they're back here, I find it to be so subtle that I think that what's going to happen when we knit, we tend to kind of have our face in it, and we're like really focused on what's going on. But once we're wearing something, we don't really notice those little things so much. So, I mean, these aren't super high contrast, but we do have some stripes going on. And really, let me try and bring that up close again for you. Sorry, it's not super bright in here today. But it really becomes more challenging to pick up those little purl bump color changes. Like I really have to look. I also did use, these are marled yarns. It's actually two different colorways from Spin Cycle yarns. And because these are marled, it hides that little demarcation, if you will, a bit more. I've worn these socks a lot. So I'm like, oh, these are a little fuzzy. They could use a little cleanup. But anyways, so my thoughts are, A, you're not doing anything wrong. That is exactly what happens, and that is what's going to happen whenever you change colors on a purl row, even if it's just purling every other 2 stitches, like ribbing. But I have a feeling you won't notice it as much when you do go to actually wear them when you're all done with them. But if it really does bother you, then my recommendation would be to save your self-striping yarn for a stockinette style sock instead of a ribbed sock like DRK Everydays. But for one, I've knit quite a few of this pattern in self-striping. One of the original DRK Everyday Socks I knit, which is in the pattern, uses Whiskey in a Teacup from Gauge Dye Works, and it's never bothered me. I've never really noticed it as I wear them. But it's totally up to you, because sometimes those little things can kind of annoy us. So if you do feel like, ugh, it's all I see, then I would just do a stockinette sock, and that way you won't have those little glitches. Next question. My question is about spinning. I am new to spinning with a spindle and want to upgrade. Due to a disability, I cannot use a traditional wheel with a treadle, so I'm looking at e-spinners. May I please ask which one you use, and what are the things I should be looking for in an e-spinner? Thanks so much. So there are so many e-spinners out there. I use a Hansen mini spinner. Whoop! I have my fiber prepped for my next spin. I almost dumped it all over the floor, but I saved it in the nick of time. So here's my e-spinner. It's in its bag. So one of the things I love about an e-spinner, I should have taken this out before. Let me just get some things out of the way. But I love how portable they are. Mine's in here, and mine's a bit on the bigger side. It's not the biggest of the e-spinners. It does have some heft to it, some weight to it, because it's mostly wood, and the motor makes it a little heavier, but I do love how compact and portable they are. So here's mine. This is a Hansen mini spinner, and the things I love about this one are it's just very high quality. The motor has been fantastic. I love the wood. I love the design of it. It's very pretty. I love the big bobbins. So these bobbins can fit, I think, close to 12 ounces of fiber. I have done a combo spin on here using 3 braids, and I think I was able to jam pack all of it on there. I know I've done at least 9 to 10 ounces on here. So they're just also really big if you want to fit a whole bunch of fiber on there, which is nice. So this is the only e-spinner I have tried, so I can't speak on other ones, but I do love this one. So I highly recommend it. That being said, there are so many options out there these days, and you can get them in all different sizes in very different price points. So, of course, I'm gonna forget the name. Oh, what is it? I have all these little words like micro, echo. Those aren't the right words. Maybe it'll come to me before we finish this one up. But there are a bunch out there. If you do a search, you can definitely probably find one that will suit your needs depending on the size you want, how, what price point you want to look at, bells and whistles, all that kinds of stuff. But I have done, I think, everything on here that I've done on any of my other wheels. So it really can do a lot, and I think you'll be able to create whatever yarn you want. This also has a nice size orifice even for doing some more fun art yarns. You can see here, or maybe you can't see that. Can you see that? This little eye right here isn't massive. So if you really wanted to do some big art yarns, you might need to keep that in mind, is how big some of the eyes and orifices are that you would want to thread that yarn through. But I've been very happy with this guy. It's driving me nuts. I can't remember the name of that other one. It'll come to me. And I'll throw a link to Hansen down here. So this is Hansen Crafts, and that is the mini spinner Pro. But they have a whole range of spinners that you can look at. I'm just gonna quickly see if I can figure out the name to that other one. Electronic spin, eel. It's the eel. I got it before it even came up. Okay, so there is, so literally just typing in electric spinning wheel, I pulled up everything from like the $200 range up to the $2,500 range. So there is a big old span that you can look into. And I have definitely seen a lot of people using, I think it's the eel, like this one's called the EEW 6.0. Is that the eel? Yes, okay, I was right. Like now I'm making up the eel part. So it's the electric eel wheel. And I think that these ones, I know that there are a few different styles, and I think that the weights, yeah, like this little nano one is only $125. And does it say its weight? I'm not finding its weight on here, but that's a big part of it too, is depending on how heavy you're okay with it being. This comes with a whole bunch of, like, it comes with 6 bobbins, which is kind of amazing. I've never heard of a wheel coming with 6 bobbins. And the really fun thing too about the electric wheels is, again, they're small and portable, but a lot of times you have to plug them into a wall. Most of them you can get some sort of battery pack, so that if you are traveling or you don't want to have it plugged in a wall, there's the battery pack option, which makes it pretty cool. I have found that in general, I prefer traveling. Like if we went on a road trip last year, and I actually did bring that because it was just so much easier for me to carry that bag in and out of where we were staying instead of one of my wheels. So there you go. I hope that's helpful. And if anybody else has an electric wheel that you really love, if you've tried like the eel wheel, or I feel like I'm gonna mispronounce it. Times like this, I wish I had practice before I hit record. I'm gonna see if I can see how it's spelled. Daedalus? That one I see just all over, so I think people really like that. I wonder if I can make Google tell me how to pronounce this. It is the Daedalus. Hold on, but let's see how we pronounce it. Okay, ready? Oh, it's doing an ad. Can you guys hear that? I don't want you to have to listen to this ad. Oh, okay. Daedalus. Okay, Daedalus. The Daedalus wheel. There you go. I hope that was worth it. Daedalus. Now we all know how to say it. Also, apparently, was a famous asteroid. Now I want to know all about that word and where it came from. It looks like it's also from mythology. So I already forgot how to say it. Daedalus. Okay. Let's move on. So there's lots of spinners out there. I hope you find one you love. Obviously, oh my gosh, Andrea. Spindles are such a great option because they are also really lightweight and portable and budget friendly. But I do love an e-spinner, especially if you want to start spinning some larger quantities. It can be really, really fun. All right, let's move on. So, oh, this is a fun one. You know, we haven't really jumped into designing and making knitting or fiber a business, that kind of conversations. I don't think we've really tapped into that for a while, so I thought this would be a fun one for today. It is apparent you've made your love of all things yarn into a profession. I too long for this goal. What suggestions can you make for an aspiring yarn professional? Would some sort of art degree be needed, and or a master knitting graduate? So obviously this industry encompasses quite a few different job perspectives. There is knitwear designer, which is what I do. There's tech editing. There are making a magazine. There's the yarn side, so dyeing yarn, spinning yarn, dyeing fiber, owning a yarn shop. I mean, there are so many different facets to this industry that you could look into. I did not go to school for this. I actually went to culinary school and cosmetology school and just basic. I did some basic college. So I have not ever gone and gotten a degree that would help benefit with this. I do think a business degree would be helpful because there is a big business. You know, you have to learn how to have your own business, there's a lot of that back end stuff that I think is easy to not think about until you get into it. And then you're like, oh, I got to figure out how to make an LLC and pay taxes and all these things. But I don't think, as far as getting an art degree or doing, you can get a knitting master certification. People like to do it for spinning too. I think that's really personal, and you would need to see if it really fits your goals. There's actually a fantastic blog post. I don't know. I'm going to see if I can find it. Where somebody broke it down, whether or not, like, it helps you ask yourself the questions of, so you can get there to like, will that benefit me to do the master spinning certificate or knitting certificate? It's something I have looked into a lot just because I like to learn all the things. I'm somebody who loves to learn. And so when I saw that you could become a master spinner or knitter, I was like, wow, that's so cool. And then you would learn all these things. So I stumbled upon this blog post a couple years ago. I'll see if it's still out there, because I thought it was really neat that somebody broke it down, whether or not, to help you come to the conclusion of like, oh, am I doing this for the right reasons? So if you are specifically talking about wanting to be a knitwear designer, again, I had to just basically learn it all through trial and error. I do think that we live in a day and age where it is easier to have access to just start a business, because you can have marketing through social media outlets. You have Ravelry to publish patterns. It's a lot easier to start your own website these days. There's so many website modules where you just go plug it in. They help you set up a shop. And all those things. I personally use Squarespace. I am not a super tech savvy person, so Squarespace was just really easy for me to go in there, plug in my information, open my online shop and all that stuff. So again, Ravelry makes it really easy. They kind of help walk you through the steps of opening up your Ravelry shop, which ended up also helping me when I did my website, because I already knew how to use things like PayPal. So that's kind of all the business end of it. As far as the knitwear design aspect of it, I think one thing that helped me is I used to be a baker, I used to be a chef, and so I already knew how to write recipes. And writing knitting patterns is really similar to writing recipes. You know, you need your ingredients, and then you gotta tell somebody how to put those ingredients together to get what they want at the end. So I think that was a helpful step for me to have. So one thing I would do is I would learn how to use, you have to be able to make a PDF. I started just by using Mac, their Pages app, program, whatever it's called. And I did that for the first few years because you can make a PDF out of it, and it was fine. Thankfully, I'm very lucky, and my sweet, sweet sister-in-law, Brittany, was well versed in Adobe, and she actually made me my pattern outline in InDesign. And so that's what I use now to create my PDFs. They just are a lot prettier. They're properly formatted, but I thankfully had that resource to tap into. If you know anybody who knows that kind of stuff, or you can absolutely take classes to learn Adobe products. There's also things like charting, depending on what kind of patterns you're drawn to. If you're really into color work, cables, or lace, you're probably going to need to figure out a way to chart those in your patterns. So for me, I actually started with Stitch Mastery, which was a program made for knitters to chart their knits. And it was great because it already had symbols for knitting and all these things. I used that for years. Unfortunately, there was an update for my Mac that it just didn't work anymore for me. And I was able to turn to my amazing tech editor and friend, Megan, who taught me then how to use Illustrator for charting. So basically all that to say, if you do know the Adobe suite, then you've got a leg up, because there are a lot of programs in there that can be really helpful for writing knitting patterns. Again, I use InDesign to write my patterns. Some people use Illustrator for both their pattern layout and charting. So If you know how to use those, that's awesome. If you know somebody who can teach you, or if you can take a class, I do think those would be really helpful programs to know. We also do use Lightroom to edit the photos for our knitwear. My husband takes my photos, but you know, we also started by taking photos with an iPhone. You know, like most of us have a decent camera on our phones. So all that to say, you could start with just pages and a phone with a decent camera, and you can start writing patterns. And then as my business grew, I was able to get a proper camera and things like that to help sharpen up those images. The other thing I will say is I use numbers, but Excel is the same thing, to create spreadsheets for grading, which brings me to the tricky bit. I think that for most people, grading is probably the more challenging thing to get figured out if your goal is to do sweater design or to design anything that you want to have multiple sizes in. I do think that learning to use Excel or numbers, a program like that, is going to be so helpful in the long run. I took a class at Stitches, which is, Stitches is no longer. I think I have mentioned in the past the teacher that I learned from. Dang. If I can remember their name, I'm gonna add it to the show notes, but I did go ahead and did a quick Google search, and I know that there's so much more out there than when I started 10 years ago. When I started, there was like one or two things I could find on knitwear design and not a lot about grading and things like that. Now, when I did the search, so much popped up. So there's a lot out there to help you learn along the way. I am going to go ahead and throw a couple links in below, but two that I knew about that I wanted to share was Megan from Pip and Pin. I had the delightful experience of getting to meet her this past spring when I was teaching at a retreat, and she does designer workshops. So I think sometimes I think she launches them a couple times a year, and I think her next one is launching in like a few days. So I put a link to that below. And then another great one is Natalie from Natalie and Stitches, and they have all sorts of workshop offerings, and she also does a blog, and like if you follow her on Instagram, she talks all the time about knitwear design and just making it the best it can be. So I thought those were two great people to check out if you did want to take some classes, especially in grading and in design. Also, there's some bigger sites like School of Sweet Georgia or even Craftsy that offer design classes and grading classes and things like that. So again, there's just a lot more out there than there used to be. I haven't taken them, but I am sure they are an excellent jumping off point to get you on your way if you want that extra help. But yeah, I guess that's it. I've talked about this especially in earlier episodes. We kind of used to touch on designing a little bit more, so you can always revisit some of my earlier episodes on here, but I just wanted to kind of talk more about how to go about maybe some learning materials and stuff like that. Again, I also love like my Elizabeth Zimmerman books and my Barbara Walker books. Those are what I referenced a lot when I started designing. So I found those really helpful too. All right, so when knitting a sweater, there is always talk of finding positive ease. How does one figure out what that is? I know in the past you've mentioned measuring your favorite sweater and going by those measurements, but could you please explain it in further detail how to do that? So I thought this was a great opportunity to revisit this topic again because I am wearing the Weekender Crew, which does have positive ease built into it. I shouldn't say built into it. You wear it with positive ease is what I'm trying to say. So let's talk about how we figure that out, especially because I actually chose a different amount of ease for my two samples. I keep looking back there thinking I have my other Weekender Crew on my mannequin, but no, they're naked. So, whoops. So the one I wore last week, you can check that out in episode 132, was my hand spun version. And I actually am wearing that one with 12 inches of positive ease. The original Weekenders, I just did 10 inches of positive ease. And then since I was going to be knitting a second one because I wanted to offer a commercially available yarn for the Weekender crew, I chose Brooklyn Tweed's Dapple. And I was like, well, if I'm knitting another one, I might as well try out a different size and compare them and see how I feel. So this one only has 7 inches of positive ease. So what does that all mean? So basically, if I took my measuring tape and measured the fullest part of my core here, my middle, my trunk, my area between my underarms and my hips, that is what you want to measure. It's not going to be the same for everyone. For some people, the fullest part of their body might be their chest. For others, it might be their tummy. So measure the fullest part on you. So what I would do, I do recommend if you've got a buddy lying around or standing around or just sitting around who can help you, I do think it's best to measure yourself with the help of somebody else. Because when we lift our arms and move around, it can kind of affect the measurement. But you can do it yourself if you need to. So I'm gonna do it over my sweater right now. I would not typically do that. Under here I have a camisole on, which I generally wear under a sweater. So what I recommend is measuring yourself over whatever it is you plan to wear under the sweater you're making. So maybe it's just your bra if you wear a bra, maybe it's an undershirt, a camisole, a t-shirt, a collared shirt, whatever it is you think you'll wear under that sweater is what you should measure yourself around. The reason you don't want to do it over a sweater like I am doing is because this sweater is going to add a little bulk and not necessarily reflect a true measurement for me. So, but as you can see, I'm just going over the fullest part of my chest here, and I'm going to get that measurement. And I recommend after you wrap your yarn, try and just like have your arms down before you read it. And also you want to kind of check and make sure that the measuring tape is going around in an even line. You don't want it drooping. You don't want it like drooping down your back, because then that's not going to give you a true measurement. All right. So for me, that is typically 35 inches, which, how many centimeters is that? Which is about 89 centimeters. So now let's talk positive ease. This sweater, I recommend, I think it was between 8 and 12 inches of positive ease. Honestly, my testers did as little as 4 and I think as much as 15. You can play around with this sweater. It can handle being more oversized or a bit more fitted. I did a looser sleeve on the Weekender crew than I did on the original Weekender. I do like to balance out a positive ease sweater with a slimmer sleeve typically, but this I wanted it to feel more like a cozy sweatshirt. So there's more wiggle room in playing with that ease. In the original Weekender, if you go down too much on the ease and don't allow yourself the recommended 10 inches, like if you try to do it with 4 inches, the sleeves are probably going to be too tight because they're not meant to be on that, they're meant to be slimmer with a looser body. Okay, so as I said, I have a 35-inch, 89 centimeter bust. This sweater recommends between 8 to 12 inches, I think. Is it 6 to 12? I'm sorry, I don't have it in front of me. But let's just say 8 to 12. I decided to do it with 7, which is fine, because what part of it's going to come down to is your own personal style, and that's totally okay. The thing that you do want to pay attention to is, like I said, if you're going too far outside that range, you might run into issues with sleeve size, yoke depth, things like that, if those weren't taken into account when the designer was choosing how much ease that pattern should be worn with. So that's the only thing to keep in mind, is where it might affect some other areas, necklines, things like that. So for me, if I wanted to wear it like I did last week with 12 inches of positive ease, that means that I need my finished sweater, so like the actual sweater, to have a total body circumference of 47 inches. So what I would want to do is go to the pattern, which I'm just going to do so that I'm giving you accurate information. All right, let's look at all the sizes here. So I want to, sorry, don't mind me while I read. So when, at the time that I published or originally tried all this on, my measurement was 34 inches. So again, I also wasn't measuring over the amount of clothing I'm wearing right now. So I'm just gonna retract my earlier statement so that I don't confuse anyone. And let's just continue with my usual bust measurement of 34 inches. So if I want to add 12 inches of positive ease to that, I want to look for the finished circumference of the sweater, which is what I always have on my patterns. When you see a finished measurement, I'm not talking about your body. I'm always talking about the garment when you look through the details of a pattern. So for the pattern, you're going to see, it'll say finished measurements. So in those finished measurements, I see that there is one for 46 inches. So that is going to give me 12 inches of positive ease. Now, let's say that originally I thought I wanted 12 inches, but let's go back to me saying I had a 35-inch bust. That would make me looking for 47 inches. Well, there's not a finished chest circumference that is 47 inches. I can either choose 46 or 50. So I'm just gonna go down an inch and choose the 46, which will give me 11 inches of positive ease. All right, now let's talk about the green one. So for the green one, if I want to have 7 inches of positive ease, now I'm looking for something that's close to 41 inches in the finished sweater measurement. So if I put this sweater on the ground and measured from side seam to side seam, that would be about 20.5 inches. And then I would double that because we're doing the full circumference, so the front and the back. So I want to look for something close to 41 inches total, which would be size 3, which is 41.5 inches. So again, we're taking our actual measurement around the fullest part of our upper body, not including shoulders. And then we are going to add to it the ease we want. Now, you had mentioned how I've recommended going into your closet, pulling down a sweater you really like and measuring that sweater. So the important thing there would be, okay, I'm pulling down my sweater and I'm gonna measure it from side seam to side seam. So pretend this is laying flat on the floor and not on my body. I would take a measuring tape and I would measure from side seam to side seam. I would just do this along. It's hard to show from down there, but I would do it, just across the middle of the sweater. The sweater doesn't have any shaping in it. The sweater you pick from your closet might, so you might want to take the measurement in a couple places or right over wherever you're measuring your body. So if you are measuring your body over the chest, maybe measure right over the chest of the sweater that's laying flat on the ground. Again, I'm going to go from side to side, and let's say it's 21. I would then double that to get the full circumference, so that would be 42 inches. I would subtract my chest measurement from that. So let's say 42 minus 34, and that would give me 8 inches of positive ease. So then I would look at the pattern I'm looking at, I would add that 8 inches to my bust and be like, okay, I want that to be the measurement I'm going to use. But always make sure to look at the designer recommendation for ease. Again, that comes down to things like, I saw somebody who, they almost looked like they didn't do any ease in their weekender. It was definitely no more than 4 inches of positive ease. And what ended up happening is the sleeves were quite slim on them, and the neck was also a little bit tight on them as well. And it's because the original Weekender was supposed to have that 10 inches of positive ease, which was going to open up that neckline further and give them a little more space in the sleeve. So if the measurement you're going for is way out of the range of what the designer recommends, then that might not be a good fit for you. So always consider that. Anyways, I hope that helps give another little idea of how to go about figuring out what ease is best for you, and also how to measure ease for yourself, decide what you like. Another tip is generally the feedback I've gotten from friends and testers alike when they are knitting patterns, and I mentioned this last week as well, but if there's an ease range, again, for this Weekender crew, it's 8 to 12 inches. So generally speaking, I found that the first end of the size range, so like 0 through 4 or 5, or even we could kind of divide it into 3. So that would be like 0, 1. Okay. So like sizes 0 through 3 might like that 12 inches, while then sizes 4 through 6, they might be happier in that 10-inch range. And then sizes 7 through 9 are gonna like even less ease, probably around that 8-inch mark, maybe even 6. Now, that is just general feedback. That's an average. It really does come down to your own personal style. So don't feel like those are rules, because they're not. You should do whatever you like and what goes with your style. But that's just something I've found to be true over the years. All right. One last question, also to do with the Weekender crew. I want to knit one in dapple. Did you alternate skeins? And if so, did you alternate every row or use helical knitting? It's another one of those words I've only ever read and not said out loud. I don't think I had this much trouble pronouncing words when I was younger. It's like, what's happening to me? So this is my dapple version. And let's see if you can tell in this lighting. Like the pockets are a little bit lighter. Can't really, the phone sometimes I feel like corrects coloring as well. But basically dapple has a really special dye process where they are kettle dyeing, and I think it's all kettle dyed maybe before it's spun. Don't quote me on that, but I do know there's a special dyeing process for this, which means that every skein of dapple is unique. They don't even use dye lots for it, which means that when you order a sweater's quantity, you can end up with quite varying degrees of color. And there are different ways you can play with dealing with that difference in color. And you can quite a few of my testers did use dapple. And so if you want to see some examples of how they manage the color changes, that's really fun to check out. I basically set my skeins on the floor and I put them in order of like lightest to darkest so that they just kind of went in a natural order. I didn't want to end up accidentally using like my lightest skein with my darkest skein and having really big lines of demarcation or bands of color. But did I do any striping? I don't think I did alternate skeins. It's been a couple months since I knit mine. But you absolutely could. If you're gonna alternate skeins, you could either do it the whole time, or you could alternate a section of rows between each skein to help blend it so that you don't see a big color block in there. And I even had, so again, my wonderful tech editor, Megan, was one of my testers this time around, and she created a fade with hers, and it turned out so beautiful because she had enough of a color change in hers where she could fade it. So that was really pretty, but you might want to try checking out some of those projects on Ravelry and seeing their notes and how they managed that. So it's really up to you. It depends on how you will feel about any color changing within your sweater and how finicky you want to be. For me, I was pretty laid back about it, and I don't even know if I did do any striping, it was probably over like 6 rows or something. And then I was like, good enough. But you definitely could alternate skeins. The one thing you do want to take care with is the purl side is the right side on this sweater for the body. So I recommend just making sure we knit it, actually knit side out, because most people prefer knitting over purling. You just have to remember to carry your yarn in front, so facing you as you are knitting the body of the sweater, so that when you turn this inside out, so that the purl side's the right side, you don't have your floats from carrying it up different rows on the right side of your sweater. So just make sure to carry it out while you're knitting, so that once you turn it inside out, they'll be on the inside. That's the only thing to really think about. All right, well, I think that's it. I don't think I have anything to show you. I don't have anything new. I was traveling this past week, so just me this week. But I hope to see you back here next week, and thank you so much for tuning in. If you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the description box below. If you feel like it, you can always hit that like and subscribe button. And I hope that you get to make something wonderful this weekend that brings you joy. Bye.